Alan Wake 2 has one of the most impressive narratives in a game ever. I've played lots of games that have great stories. You have your simple stories like The Last of Us that make it an enjoyable journey to follow, or the more complicated storytelling as seen in Nier Automata. And then there is Alan Wake 2, a game that has both a very simple and engaging premise to follow, but goes so much deeper and becomes a lot harder to grasp. Like an ocean, some would say. The game is a grand achievement in storytelling in video games and is seriously impressive the more you think about it, and today I want to try to understand and analyze the plot of Alan Wake 2, because even when writing this, I'm still not sure I fully comprehend the story, so this will be very theoretical. So before I get too deep into the video, spoilers, naturally. First up, we'll start at the top of the iceberg with the easiest component to dissect, the concept of duality. Duality is one of my favorite devices used in storytelling, seen in the likes of Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club or Stephen King's The Dead Zone. In its simplest meaning, duality simply means being dual, meaning that it consists of two parts. However, from a literary perspective, the term duality is used to show two opposing elements, which can either be connected to one another by sharing similar traits, or contrasting each other to such a high degree that it ultimately connects them. And those final two views on duality can both be used to interpret the narrative of Alan Wake 2. The idea of two elements is very present in Alan Wake 2. Even the title of the game has the two in it, and they go all in. You have two FBI cops, brothers doing commercials, two separate campaigns to play through, and lots more. Subtly speaking, the two does suggest a connection, but what exactly is being connected in the story? Arguably the easiest fruit to pick from the tree is the idea of Alan Wake trying to find some sort of connection to the real world from the dark place in order to find an echo of inspiration to save himself. But I think the theme of duality used here is used to enhance the horror of the game and used to show how everything, including us humans, have more than one side to us, which goes into the mind aspect. This is where the more interesting part of duality comes into play, where two elements juxtapose each other to a high degree, but in the end are connected. I believe the duality here is to show how in many cases that the main thing stopping anyone from achieving anything is themselves, which is characterized in the form of the dark presence and the dark place. This presence has the ability to manifest itself onto a person, and actually also has the power to go between the dark place and the real world. Now, to actually continue on, I have to establish that my main theory behind my next points is that the dark place and presence is simply just the mind of the person in question, which becomes pretty evident in the endgame when Saga gets trapped in the mind place and manages to escape, I think, by overcoming her greatest fears and doubts. So when we see Alan Wake traversing the dark place and we see the world change around him and all the take and walk around him, it's the guilt from his own mind that is stopping him from moving on. And when we see Saga go to see Alan in the holding cell, Scratch, Wake's evil doppelganger, takes control and causes havoc, again showing how he let the other side of his mind take control. It's because of these two examples and more in the game, which leads me to believe the duality is meant to highlight the weakness of one one's mind, and ultimately, despite there being many differences between the goals and insecurities of the characters, they're connected, and when they do, cause echoes in the mind place or overlaps in both to show how both elements find a common ground, they're able to progress forward. And the idea of the characters fighting against their own minds and others is the driving factor in the story, which shows how the lack of a connection with yourself or others can have far greater consequences than positives. Alan Wake kills Tom Zane, as Zane worked with Scratch to escape the dark place, which extended Alan Wake's stay in the dark place, or Saga not listening to the Koskela brothers, causing one of them to die. So that's where I stand on duality, how it shows how you have a connection with your own faults and manage to understand others, you are able to progress to a far greater degree than alone, which we can see towards the end of Alan Wake 2 when Saga and Alan work together to solve everything and seemingly manage to find a way out, or at least get closer to an answer. And now we can talk about the ending and the first part of that final sentence, it's not a loop. The concept of a loop is quite terrifying, where whenever you get towards the end, you end right back up at the beginning. And if we add the terrors of conflict with the dark present in said loop, it is straight up a nightmare. There are quite a few loops we see in Alan Wake 2, more so in Alan's side of the story, like in a projector room with a really cool cameo from Sam Lake, or trying to enter the Ocean View Hotel the wrong way. But the biggest loop that gets brought up so many times throughout the game is the idea of Alan Wake going into the writer's room and seemingly shooting Scratch, which later turns out to be himself, but not actually himself in the flesh, but himself in a different timeline who is also placed there by Scratch, who actually wasn't Scratch, but This is the part that makes Wake understand that he isn't in the loop, but how does he come to this understanding, and what is the importance of a loop? Wake understands this revelation upon seeing Alice's final video in the dark place, who he earlier thought had offed herself because of Wake's dark presence terrorizing her, but she reveals that that was just a ploy to trick Scratch and is still actually alive, and is actively trying to help Wake find his way out of the dark place, which further makes me believe that the dark place isn't real and is just a dark cloud that clouds one's own mind. But that is how Alan figures it out, and now we can look at the hints that suggest that this isn't a loop, but rather a spiral. The obvious example is that we are not playing through the same moments over and over again, but we are playing through variations of these moments. Although Wake wakes up multiple times in Mr. Door's talk show or in New York with no weapons, he is getting closer and closer to the end goal, where the stakes are getting higher and harder to progress. In addition to that, in a loop, you don't get this feeling of deja vu that the game sets up, as a loop constantly has the same outcome over and over again. With this in mind, we can finally look at the second part of the final sentence. It's a spiral. Those are the last words said by Alan Wake before the game ends, which, just like the first game, ends in a very cryptic manner, and also like the first game's final phrase, Alan Wake 2's ending shares a similar sentence structure as well, with the original being, it's not a lake, it's an ocean. But now we have it in the form of it's not a loop, it's a spiral. The evidence we have that it is a spiral is now evident in both meanings of spiral the shape and the metaphor of spiral. A spiral shape shows how things might pass by the same checkpoints in a continuous loop, but at different intersections, making the moments different. Prime example being the Mr. Door talk shows, which all start the same but have vastly different outcomes, from the reveal of the Book of Return, a musical documenting Wake's life, and finally an eerie talk with Mr. Door himself about consequences. Therefore, as things change, it creates the feeling of deja vu, and is a possible reason as to why Alan Wake doesn't remember much, as seeing similar imagery over and over again can lead to false memories and just forgetting things in general, which also leads Wake struggling to find inspiration to get out, as these similar intersections that keep changing are messing with his perception. And then we have the metaphor of spiraling out of control, which is also related to the shape, as the line of a spiral gets far shorter and quicker the closer you get to the center, which is basically an uncontrollable roller coaster, which is both evident in both campaigns. Both Saga and Alan's campaigns start out relatively tame and easy to follow, but end up going wild, where the story is slowly taking over reality itself. As the stakes and situations both escalate towards the end of the game, it makes it clear that we're getting closer to the center of the spiral, but does that mean the end? Will Bright Falls be saved from the dark presence? Well, if we take a look at a theory relating to spiral dynamics, we still have a ways to go before reaching the end. I am no expert in this field, but spiral dynamics is a theory that shows the stages of human evolution, or a progress of a given matter, as we as humans progress through situations in stages. Although the amount of stages differs depending on whose theory of spiral dynamics we choose to follow, I'm choosing to go with Beck's, and his tiers follows as this: holistic, systemic, relativistic, strategic, purposeful, egocentric, clannish, and survival. Based on the story thus far, we've seen Alan and Saga's stories go from holistic, the belief of needing the full context to understand the interconnectivity, to the strategic part, which is where the game ends, as they both have a somewhat understanding of how the dark place works and how they can beat it. Add Alice into the mix, who appears to have a solution, and that nails it down that we are only halfway through the spiral. We've seen Saga show some sort of relativism towards the Andersons, her relatives who she refused to believe were actually related to her, who she thought were made up by the story, and Alan's systemic approach, as he tries to focus on how he can approach movement around the dark place. So that leaves us with the latter half of the spiral, from purposeful to survival, which also goes through egocentrism and clannish elements, which leads me to believe and echoes the sentiment of horror stories said by Wake, that there are only monsters and victims. So I'm going to say that we are going to be getting a bad ending, which I think might be obvious, I'm not sure, but what will happen? I really don't know. I can definitely see the dark presence taking over Saga to push out her insecurities with Logan, to make her become focused on one goal alone, being to save her daughter, and bring out the will to survive by killing who might end up in her way, which I can see Alan doing the same. But other than that, I'm out. The narrative is really thought-provoking, both in its themes it tackles regarding the human condition, and just how compelling of a narrative it is. Will Saga, Alan, and Alice seemingly be able to escape the dark place? Is Alex Casey doing okay? Will we see more of Agent Estevez and the Koskela brothers? Find out more next time on Night Springs. And with that, welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It really does mean a lot, especially on this one, as I think it got pretty messy in terms of my own writing of this video towards the end. If you enjoyed my ramblings and theorization of Alan Wake 2's narrative, be sure to leave a like if you did, and a dislike if you didn't enjoy it. But more importantly, what are your thoughts on Alan Wake 2's narrative? Comment them down below, as I would love to hear them. And if you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe, as that comes a long way in helping the channel out. Right, I'm not sure if I will be making another video on Remedy for next week, but we'll see what I can think of or whatever game I want to talk about next. But in 2 weeks time, there'll be the second collab video on the channel, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. But other than that, thanks again for watching all the way to the end. It really does mean a lot, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good rest of your day, night, and week. And with that, Storm out.